we're going to bring in our fantasy hand, and we'll be attaching it to the open part of the wrist on the arm, or the stub, I guess you could say. All right, we're going to prepare this a little bit, and stuff we don't need. This was where we last left off with the fantasy hand, so the most recent one that that wasn't posed yet with neutral pose. Well, first of all, we're not going to use these feathers. They're too heavy to actually use for an interactive character in which we're going to prepare in this example. So we're going to grab all those feathers and just delete them. Try the outliner, and it's best place to grab anything that's a feather because it's labeled, and just hit delete. Next, we keep that outliner open, and we took careful time to put in a joint system. We can bring it back in, but at this moment we're not going to use it. So if we're going to build a skeleton for the whole body, which is not part of the assignment, by the way, that was all extra, but if we are going to do it, we can build the skeleton as piecemeal as we did the modeling. So right now we're just focused on the modeling. We're going to delete any skeleton, and the binding goes away with it. All right, so we're left with just the hand in which we're going to attach. If we ever wanted to 3D print this hand, it would be ready to go. We could put it in the pose, probably not those feathers, but this hand would be very amenable to 3D printing. We would just have to keep that intact to have a solid watertight mesh. But we're going to attach it to the arm, not 3D printing, so we need to delete that part. So that's open. Anyhow, before we go over there, before we, that is, import this hand into the scene with the body and the arm, let's count up the CVs at the end here. Could use making sure you don't miss any. It looks like we have 12. Let me see if I can frame this a little bit nicer. Better, of course, to look at it in the side view so it's nice and flat. Okay, let's select once again, and that says 12 CVs, and we know the arm has 10, so we have a choice to make: either add a line there or delete a line here. When I say lines, of course I mean edges. So you're going to make an aesthetic and economical choice. It doesn't seem like any of these could go away without adding damage to the hand. We have the conflict, perhaps if you want to see it as a conflict, of different styles too, where this looks very detailed comparatively to the cartoony look of it. So here's where you're going to make some sort of fork in the road change, is if you want to simplify this, or you want to add more detail to your other design, depending how I chose to go a little bit cartoony with my body design. Maybe you stuck with a kind of realism, and this won't be an issue. But every project is going to be different, so I'm just letting you know it's best to find the CV number, so that's 1-to-1, so when we do import it, it's going to be no problem to merge that right onto the end of your arm. For me, I find one edge right here, right there. I can see through it. See a little better. I'm going to see darker. You can see it. I'm going to remove that one if I can. But looking around this, it seems that every line is ending in an essential edge of another quad extrusion. So I'm pretty much stuck, unless it's a big redesign. I guess I'm kind of stuck at 12. Let's do this. Take this hand as is. I'm going to select it as a single mesh, and I'm going to export selection. I don't want to save the whole scene and import the scene into another Maya scene with the body. that would double up all the cameras and lights and anything. It would just be a mess. What I want to do is just select the mesh and say export selection, which will bring with it the textures and all that stuff. So I'm naming it hand exp as a Maya file. Exp for export, so it's only exporting the mesh again. All right. Opening back my fantasy body and bringing in the hand. The exported saved hand, I'm going to import. Open it. It's going to come in really big. This hand imported in wherever location I wanted here. Also, it has locks on it, and it jumped to this position where, as an importation, it locked all the channels as a precaution. Maya did that automatically. I'm going to unlock it. If this ever happens to you, if it ever happens, you see a gray and nothing will turn or work, it's grayed out, all you need to do is to select it and go to the channel box, and where it has these grays, that meaning it's locked, you select all the grayed channels, shift select all of them, right click, and go to unlocked. Unlock channel. Alright, so here we go. Facing the wrong way, so if that's the case, you're going to just duplicate this and make the other hand. It's pretty simple. What I mean, if this is a right hand and we're modeling the left side, obviously we need a left hand, unless this creature has, it's kind of funny to have it a unique bent backwards, but I'm going to flip it. I'm going to show you how you can do that. Just select the hand. There's a couple ways you could do it. You could do it with the duplicate special and put negative values, or you could just straight up duplicate the hand like this, and we're going to put negative values in scale. But first, let's make these all 0. It's easier by doing modify freeze transformations. So look here first. I had that selected. Modify freeze transformations, and that makes everything zeroed out. And that's, you're going to be using that a lot in modeling, and especially rigging if you ever get to that area. So now it's much more easier to edit -1, to add -1 here in scale. If you add -1 to all 3, you get the reverse of the hand. So if it's a left hand, now you've got a right hand. And just delete the other one. As we model arms stretched in a T pose, it's customary to keep palms open, splayed fingers slightly, and palms down. Palm down. There's some other recommendations where you can have it, depending on how the arm will move, the palm out like this when it is modeled and rigged. But for most applications, it's good to keep it flat, pose down here. Because mostly if the arms are kept to the side, and if there's a skeleton later inside that has it flopping up and down, you're anticipating the most common movement, which would be like that, up and down of the wrist. So again, I'm going to grab this edge and take off B, maybe hold X, so then I get, maybe I've missed some of those. Did I miss some? I got too many. I just want those right there, not that one. Okay, and with X, snap with maintain component space off. I'm going to get a good indication of how those two are going to connect. So 10 on this side, 12 on that side. All right, first thing I would do is start snapping together points that seem the best proximity. So snapping is a bit different than merging. Snapping is just temporarily putting two CVs right on top of each other just to see how that would look. So you don't have to merge or commit to merging until you're ready. If we look at the proximity, it seems this one wants to go to that one to that one, etc. So let's try doing that. For just snapping, if you hit the W to move, and then you hit the V key as in Victor, you can see what's happening up here. That little magnet is turning on and off. Okay. So if you hold the magnet down and move, you can see better in 1. If I hit 1, you can pull it right back off again. So see that point there, that's CV. Holding V down and just dragging, it's going to snap to where the nearest CV is you like. This one seems to want to go there. I'll just leave it there for the time. This one seems to want to snap there. That one seems to want to snap there, etc. And later, when I work this out, I can actually merge them. But if I want to change where they go, that's easy because these are still two separate objects and not merged yet. And that's the great benefit of snapping. Holding V down and just dragging. And this one seems to want to snap there. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, so we knew that the UV is getting stretched because we're stretching the CVs. Let's not worry about that because we're going to need new consideration for those anyway. And our major hurdle now is merging and not having enough lines. So what I'll choose to do is add some. Let's make that gray so it's not distracting. I'm going to add one to meet this. Everything else seems to have something to snap to. So I'm going to add an edge here. Yes, it's going to go around, but it's a worthy addition. So that's going to be for that one. And then I'll need one more, right, for this one. So that's going to go there. Now we have something for every CV to snap to. And then I'm going to just massage that extra complexity into the body. Everything's still all quad. It's just adding this line all the way through, which could be blended better throughout. Okay, so now I'm going to start merging these neighboring CVs of these two different objects. But first, in order to merge these two things, they need to be of the same mesh. So it's a problem for selecting one CV and then CV of something else and then trying to merge those two if they're of two different mesh. Okay. Even though I have these two selected from different mesh, I'm trying to merge in there. No matter how you set the threshold, these two are not going to merge. So that's a problem. So the way to fix that, and it's in the workflow, is to combine these two meshes. It sounds like that's what we're doing anyway, but actually what we do is we select one, we select the other, and then combine them. So once they're both selected, you go to Mesh and Combine. Now you see when they're selected, I can select that part, and it's all one mesh. Even though these points are gapped, Maya sees it as all one mesh. And if it's one, then you can truly merge vertices. So merging will now work. I'm going around hitting G to merge all those points that were earlier snapped together. Selecting both with Shift. Oops, make sure you don't get 3. I think I made a mistake there. And just snapping one to one. Okay, so I believe I got them all 12, and snapped all together. So now seeing it as one mesh. And seamlessly the edges and the CVs flow right through it. And you can make any modifications you like here. After it's connected. Okay, so I'm going to stop at that point, and then I'll work on the legs, or actually one leg for the left side of the body. We'll twirl around what we have so far. So before we build out the legs, you might have been wondering about the color map that's already attached to this hand after we combined it and we merged it, how that seems to work in the UV. Let's not worry about that now, just a preview of what's going on in the UV. These shells that you created for your hand, they are still there. We are going to use them later. We're just going to move stuff around. As we build more parts, we can reuse, or let's say utilize, what's already there of the UV shells. This one right here represents the body. So what we're going to do after modeling the whole body is we're going to fit everything in this 0, 1 space. So we're going to shrink down all the UVs we've made, all the UV shells for the different body parts, and arrange many parts in this 0, 1 space. With the body, which has not been laid out yet, you can see it's a tangle, and there will be the legs, everything else. It'll be for the whole body, not the half. And anyway, then we'll make another much larger UV snapshot and shrink down all the features and the painting to fit within it. It's hard to describe now. It'd be like a really, really large mosaic, and it's just taking what you've already painted. So nothing is lost, and it will work out in the end. So let's not pay too much attention to that part. We'll just continue building. Glancing in this front view, we have our half body, arm, and hand attached, and we're focusing now on the leg. We're leaving a space for the head, which we won't even do the neck yet. Looking in the side view, it seems the legs, as skinny as they are, they just poke out, or they emerge from around this area of the mesh. So it seems like that face right there is the one we can extrude, similar to the arm, to sprout out from the body. Before I do that, I think I'm going to insert one more edge right here, because it's not good to have these lines on a diagonal. It's hard to see. Let me show you what I mean. If I did this, so I'm going to grow a leg out of that by extruding it and pulling it down. What's not so desirable is this line on an angle on a diagonal right here, because when I mirror it over, it's going to cause some tension. It would be better if it were all quad right at the dividing line. So if I delete this, or undo, and instead I insert an edge right here all the way through. Now it seems like a big sacrifice to add a lot there, but I actually needed it. If I looked around at how this head is going to later sprout out, it was quite stretching like this already. It in fact needed that edge. So that's not a bad deal. Okay, now if I go and select that, which is sprouting out in the right place for the leg, pull it down, it'll look like that, and not interfering the pattern of parallel lines at the division right here. And it's there's no diagonal or star-shaped lines connecting at the edge anymore. So that is a really good habit and a worthy sacrifice. I'll probably need to go in here and smooth some of this as we go too, as any new lines may come in as latecomers, any new edges. Just come back and smooth all the edges a little bit, just poking and pushing them around to unify or make more even the space between the squares. Back to the leg, I'm going to fashion this in the side view somewhat like this. I know that's not drawn in the design, but I think it needs a little substance here for transition, and then extrude out again. Okay. It's going to feel similar to the arm. Check these different views here. Probably use X-ray and shading. These are really, really skinny, so I might need to step down to get that thinness there. Need a couple of extrusions to get down to that diameter, that cylindrical leg shape, and then extrude again. And I'm just about there. Etc. But we should check in the side. Oops, got off track a bit. We're just above the knee here. Also turn that to a kind of X-ray. And I'll complete this and come back to you with finished at the ankle, let's say. Should first see how it's looking in one mode too, before we build too much. Do that 1-3 test. So kind of, it's looking pretty good. Okay, onward I build. Okay, built down the leg, and I inserted extra edges where there's the knee and this funny protracted ankle. It looks thick here, and then I guess this is the extended ankle of this stork-like leg, and it fans out here. It's fatter here in the front view, but then look at the side, you don't really see it. But just try to make a compromise and fit as best your own leg design, wherever you have. And I'll finish out the toes and cut back. That's what I have so far for the leg. Extrude a toe on the front of here. Now, for your feet, all I can emphasize in the design of your character is, again, to keep it simple. Just have a shoe there. If you had naked feet with toes, it would give you a lot to contend and model. Just simplify the character. Maybe they have cartoony feet or just simple shoes. That would be much more manageable for finishing the project. And I know it was not in the design, but I'm going to add that claw foot right there. The four-fingered chicken foot type thing. Otherwise, he probably would just fall over without that back claw to stabilize him. That claw right there. Ooh, looks very scaly. Comes up a little higher like a thumb as opposed to the back. It's one of those more rare times where I'm working a lot more in the perspective view, because in the other views it's very hard to see what's going on here. I'm in the top view with this blocking it. Again, it would have helped to have a top view illustration image plane, but this figure at the moment I'm going to wing it in the perspective view. Hopefully a more rare instance of this kind of. I'm not making it a habit. Side view, it's really going off the reference, but I want to redesign as I model because I think I need a more substantial foot to give it some weight support. Than that was a little too thin, I think, for his body and a style sort of perspective. So I'm giving the foot more stability and redesigning as I model. Okay, something like this. Looking at it at the overall proportion with the body and how it relates to the hand and the talons there. Okay. So, with the foot and leg considered finished, I am going to mirror this over the other side. You might want to take a spin around to be sure there's no other polish you want to do. I did a little bit more off screen. I did some polishing and a little bit more work on the foot. I'm just going to call it there, and I'm going to say this is ready to mirror. So the next major step is mirroring this torso over to the other side, and a few items of prep to consider before we do that. One is we have to make sure that this line is absolutely straight. I already showed you how to select all those CVs using X with component space off on the move tool and have them all in a perfect line. We'll do that again. Let's turn off image planes right now to concentrate on the mesh. And we just see our mesh here. We want to make sure all these vertices here are absolutely on mathematically perfect plane. You see those are a little off here. That's going to cause problems in the mirror. So we're going to make sure we have that. It's off from last time, but it's in the move snap settings, retain component spacing off. And we could probably bring the grid in again, and then move tool holding X, and it's going to snap it right to that dark line. That's, you're bisecting your model as you go, and now it's perfectly on there. Okay, we're just about ready to mirror it. I have everything on that line. There would be one more step with dealing with this leg because it will cause an error in the mirror. Let me show you what I mean. If I just mirror it now, which I'm prepared to do, steps are, let's delete all that history before we mirror. So edit, delete by type, history. Okay. And let's just try mirror straight away and see what happens. Okay, it will be selecting the mesh as one total mesh, then mesh, mirror, let's go to that option box to open up the mirror axis. So this mirror axis right here is Y. Switching to Y and clicking apply. It is wrong because it understood the wrong angle. So it did a pond-like reflection of it. So we're going to change it back to X, and X was correct. So one problem was that toe, here's the whole thing, mirrored, okay, that toe crossed the line over to the other side, which conjoined it. So that's one issue. You have to make sure before you mirror it over that nothing is falling over that other side. Another issue would be if you had a leg that's really close to the middle, it would start stretching and putting geometry connecting at the bisection right here. It's kind of hard to visually describe, but there's all kinds of mirroring errors that can happen, but this is where you're going with it in building half. There's different ways to model in a mirror. I could have done an instance duplication with a negative value in all the X, Y, and Z scale, and what that would result in is you could model and mirror one side while seeing the other change automatically. You might have seen tutorials that do that, and that could be a preferred way to do it. I'd like to just concentrate on one half and not be distracted by the other, and then mirror it at the end. Of course, you can undo and go back before it was mirrored. And if you have history on, you can go back to those nodes. So I'm going to make sure that toe doesn't cross over that line. And it was a problem in the original design, so maybe I just have to splay the feet a little bit more going off the illustration. So I moved it over a bit here, and I know it's diverging from the original design. That's why I kept it a little bit sketchy, not a very masterly illustration that I would end up tweaking anyway. Keeping it a rough design is a good idea, because when you get into these areas, you're going to be sculpting a lot more and making design decisions as you sculpt much more than you thought. Alright, so I'm leaving a space and I'm splaying it out a little more, which won't hurt anything. Actually, it helps a little bit if I want to rig it in the end. And also, if I do rig it and I have a bone system in there, I can reposition the leg at any pose I want. So I can put it right back later if I want. Alright, let's try that mirror again. I'm going to select and then mirror options. And we know it's the mirror axis is X. And we know that because we can see the mesh has X in that red arrow. And it's in the negative direction of X, going opposite of that arrow, that direction. So it should be X with the mirror direction of negative. Apply. All right, so that did it correctly. And there we have a full body. Now, we have some lumpiness or maybe imperfection of how this all came together in the mirror. I took wireframe off, shaded off, and this part can be smoothed. Looked like it gave him some extra curves in anatomy. And also, if you go back to your design, you'll see it's certainly going to be a little bit off. That is, when you go back to the image planes and you compare, it's not going to be exactly, it's actually not too bad. I thought this was going to be more off, but it's nice and centralized as best we could have it or hope for as a image plane design leading to a mesh. The legs are the biggest thing that changed. So really the last thing to say after this mirror is, after you mirror, you're not done modeling. You're going to have some issue to deal with, maybe a line in the middle, maybe some deletion of edges, or some smoothing to do, because you'll have a new kind of awkward look or lumpiness. So there's another thing where our bodies may be symmetrical, but not perfectly symmetrical. So you can now, after the mirror, instill some asymmetry into it. Not too much, because you're going to end up making this difficult to manage. But a little bit of asymmetry, especially in a face, will help it look less mechanical. And for this part right here where it's doing this furrow, I can, and this part right here might not have been foreseen, you could go in this sculpt smooth. Like in the mesh tool sculpting, you recall this and can choose relax. Oops. Can smooth out. Okay, well, don't worry about the green. That has to do with the types of materials and UVs on it or not on it while I smooth. Also, I should mention a couple tools that are very useful in the development of symmetrical bodies and faces and such is, even after you mirror it, there's many different techniques to show how you can half your work by only doing one half and updating the other. Let's say you're following this method I'm showing you, and you've already mirrored it, but you want to add some modifications to both sides. Say you wanted to make this part of the hand thicker, and you didn't want to do it twice. There's another way to split your work in half, and that's to use the existing symmetry settings in the tool settings. So in the move setting here, what I do to get this menu is to double click the move in the same place you found move snap settings, retain component space. Here you're having a sub menu called symmetry settings, and if I set, normally this was off, and if I select one part of the hand and I move it, the other part doesn't. But if I say symmetry, I'm going to object X, because I know this is mirrored on the X-axis, and I select the hand, a part of the top of the hand on one side, the other side also selects and will also move. So that's real handy if you want to continue doing work symmetrically and you don't want to double it, so you just can move both out at one time. And of course that will work with the B setting, so you can move it more softly, whatever you need. It's going to work great on a face or anything right in the middle of the symmetry settings. Say I forgot to put a bend or a bow on the leg, I can easily do that using the symmetry settings. So that's the tool settings by double clicking the move tool in the symmetry settings submenu and choosing the right reflection. Due to the object, I put object X, and you have to remember to turn that off if you forget, or you could accidentally distort stuff. Alright, so I am going to use it to make this hand a little bit thicker. And I'll probably trim his nails a little bit of manicure. It doesn't need to be so sharp, I suppose, a little menacing for a silly, friendly looking creature. And even if I delete parts of this, it will be deleted on the other side as well. So, useful tool, symmetry selection. It also may be useful to know reflection and symmetry actions can be put on many tools. That was just the select and the moving tool, so you can do two sides at once. Also in the sculpting tools, right here it's already, if I go to, let's say, the relax and the option box for it, don't be distracted by the green, has to do with the UVs. And I put here symmetry, it was off, and I put object X, and this is the submenu this is what the menu that pops up after clicking the option box of the sculpting tools. It's where you change size and strength. Well, you can change symmetry here too, so you can have both sides of, see how you're working two sides at once. It's a little bit hard to see. Maybe it would be easier to see if I chose like the grab tool just as an example, and I turned on the symmetry to object X, and you can really pull it out. Then you can really see how that's operating, both sides at once. So you can continue symmetrical design or redesign if that's what you like once you're in this world of a mirrored object, and still have the benefits of mirroring and symmetry. So symmetry can be set on many different tools. It's just a couple examples of it. So once you do mirror, you're not finished with that possible reflection. Now for me, I use this center edge here very faithfully because it needed that right at the center to cause a bisection in order to mirror. But after it's mirrored, it seemed to add this extra dimple throughout it, and I just don't need it. It seems like I don't need all those edges, sets of edges. I can hit delete, but that's on the keyboard. That's not enough because it leaves behind these CVs. So I'm going to undo. What you need to do if you want to delete that excessive amount of line at the center is you're going to edit mesh. Before I do that, of course, you're going to select one edge, and you can use the arrows to go all the way around. I use the right arrow. Okay, then I know I go all the way around him. And then I'm going to edit mesh, delete edge vertex. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to continue to even out and polish the surface as much as I can. Image planes may be of some use at this point, but they're not really driving the work anymore. Your eyes and your sculpting is. You can use soft modification. That's holding B. Using the heat to move stuff. You can use the sculpting tools, whatever, to get this final product, because you're just about done now with the body. I'll just work on a little bit more and save it. And then I'll be ready for UVs. However, you're wondering about all the feathers coming off, all that cardboard paper craft design that was here. How am I going to do that? Well, I mentioned in the earlier video that I'm not going to actually model it out of geometry. I'm going to use, for the red parts and that brown part, everything that's looking like feathers attached to him. I'm not going to use paint effects either. What I'm going to use is transparency maps or cards, transparency cards, to give the illusion that that has thickness, and that will be very light, very interactive, and I'm just going to stick them on as I go to parts of the body. Also, I'll probably need to build out the back of him a little bit to attach some of that to. So I'm going to prepare that for transparency cards. So that will be in the next video, as well as talking about UV and how to recycle all your old UV. You don't have to redo any UV for the hand, and you're just going to put it all together like a big puzzle. And it's going to come together rather quick, and it's going to get easier and easier as you learn and understand more.